Hey guys and girls, how's it going? Bored now, back with you for the latest part of my top 50 personal favourite science fiction movies. This is going to be part 3, and on this video I will be running down numbers 30 to 21. So I've done 2 parts so far. I'm doing 10 films per video, and you can find the other 2 parts, the first 2 parts on the channel. I will stick, if I remember, I keep forgetting this, but if I remember I'll stick in the links in the description to this. I'll do my best to remember. Also, on the last video I forgot to do like a rundown sort of thing at the end, so I'll try and remember this time. And when I finally get to number 1, I'll do a rundown of the whole thing up to 2 and then do the number 1, if you see what I mean. So before I start, just a quick note for the channel, and it's actually a TV thing, but some of you might know I made a start a while back on Stranger Things Season 3, the latest season, and for those of you who are regulars, you already know my thoughts on Season 3. I absolutely loved it, but it's been a while since I've done a video. I only really got to do 2 episodes, which is annoying because I've got notes for all the season now, but I've made a decision on that, and that's basically then at a later date I will review the whole of Stranger Things from the beginning. I think that's the best way to do it because it's a show I really love and a show I would like to talk about in depth on the channel, and I think it's something which would be fun to go back, rewatch it, and to review the whole thing on the channel. My only decision is whether I wait until the whole thing is finished and then do it, or whether I do it just at a later date and make a start on the first season. I'm not sure. I'll see what happens scheduling wise. It might be quite fun just to wait till it's finished, but who knows, I might start it before then. I think the plan is for them to like do 4 or 5 seasons, so there's only like 1 or 2 more seasons, if that's true anyway, so I could wait, but I'll see how things go. If I've got extra time I might start early, we'll see. But that's just a note on Stranger Things. I think that's probably the best thing to do for that, is to do the whole thing from the start and do it that way. So I'm excited for that, but I just thought I'd mention that on this video. And with that said, I'll get into we're into the top 30 of my sci-fi movies list now. And number 30, this is a cult classic and one of this director's most beloved films. It is Brazil from 1985 from Terry Gilliam, also director of 12 Monkeys, Time Bandits, various other things. The Fisher King, which is this really good early 90s film, more of a drama, although it has a fantasy element, but that's a really underrated film. One of the late Robin Williams' best performances, really. Fisher King's really good, but that's a gem. This is more well known, although it's a cult classic, so it is a very niche film from 1985, and it also counts as like a Christmas movie as well, bizarrely. But yeah, it's his dreamlike and surreal vision of really a 1984 type setting, or a Kafkaesque or fable. That's Franz Kafka. You've got Jonathan Pryce, who's recently been Oscar nominated. Brilliant, underrated British character actor. He stars as lonely Sam Lowry, and he's searching for a woman who appears to be in his dreams during his mind-numbing sort of basic low-paying day job. So it's a real sort of powerful critique on like capitalism and the whole corporate type machine, and kind of on isolation, loneliness. And it definitely gets in and depicts, the over-reliance on technology and machinery, a big theme of, classic sci-fi. But at the same time, it's full of energy, imagination, life as well. It does have these life-affirming, visually stunning moments. I mean, the scenes where it indulges in like kind of full on sort of fantasy. It really goes for it, and those scenes, I think, because of the bleaker, darker scenes, those more magical scenes really balance it out, and they really strike home points of their own. But it's of course one of the most famous scenes from the film is like the visual of him flying through the air as like a sort of a half man half unicorn sort of thing, but really beautiful, really embraces cinema. Yeah, it's one of Gilliam's most playful and invented films. It's just full of riddles, full of fun, full of interesting, quirky characters, but very dark, very challenging as well. Has some interesting themes. It has a fantastic supporting cast. You've got Robert De Niro basically in one scene. They put him on the poster, I guess, to try and sell the film, but he is only in one scene. But boy, is it a memorable scene. You've also have Michael Palin, who of course was in Monty Python with Gilliam. You've got Bob Hoskins, really, really great cameo, and Ian Holm as well. So some real British acting legends in there. But yeah, a dystopian nightmare vision of the future, but with a playful fairy tale type thing going on as well. Brazil is my number 30. I think the reason it wasn't higher, I know it would be for many people, is I've not seen it that many times. I've seen it a few times, but I think when I've seen it, I think they've been quite far apart. Like I saw it not too long ago on TV, but as much as I like it, it's probably not the sort of film I would return to a lot for whatever reason. I think it just has that sort of feel where you have to be in the mood for it. So that's probably why it's a bit lower than you might expect, because it's just not one I feel the need to return to that often. But it's a very good film. That's Brazil, my number 30. My number 29, I've gone for a version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the classic sci-fi story, and I've gone for the 1978 version. So this is the Philip Kaufman version, which personally I enjoy this, and I enjoyed the 50s version. But personally, I think this is the better version. I think it does a great job of updating the themes of the story, the original film. I really like the slow burn, paranoid filled sort of thriller feel. It's very character driven. You've got a really impressive cast like Jeff Goldblum. This was one of his early films, one of the films that really sort of put him on the map. Arguably, the Fly took him to the next level, but this was one of his early performances. You've got a pre-Alien Veronica Cartwright, who's really consistent as always. And I love Leonard Nimoy sort of sending up like his Spock-like persona. And I think it's just the combination of like the thriller pacing and the tension of certain scenes, but also the more crazy, wacky sort of scenes as well. It still has that going on, which I think any version of this sort of story has to do. Some really beautifully judged shot scenes, like a scene when the characters, the Sutherland character and his like girlfriend or wife, they're in a car, and the camera position is like behind them, so they're out watching. They're looking out on the chaos sort of thing of the streets around them as this thing unfolds. So that's a very, very good shot. I think certain effects maybe haven't aged too well, so maybe that's where the film has, is a little weaker. I mean, the man's head on the dog, for example, just looks ridiculous now. And the ending is one that kind of some people just find a bit too silly and hammy, but it works well enough for me. But overall, it's a really good film, and I think the best version of Invasion of the Body Snatchers than I've seen. There's still a few I haven't seen, but that's the 1978 version. 28, a big hitter here, and it's Spielberg, classic Spielberg. Close Encounters of the Third Kind from 1977, same year as the original Star Wars. And I sort of think of this as the more arty, sort of subtle side of Spielberg. It's a bit more slow paced. It has this more expansive sort of kind of experimental look to it, but it still has that sense of wonder and beauty which Spielberg has. It's just a bit more of a slower pace, art house type feeling film with how the scenes play out and the characters, but it's a real spectacle like you would expect from classic Spielberg. It really moved things on for how we view aliens on film and what we look at and think about this sort of spectacular science fiction story. Really impressive characters. Sort of, it's all about language in a way and communication, dense sort of language. And as I said, it appeals to the imagination. I find it a bit overrated. I still don't put it up quite up there with Spielberg's best. I think maybe the pacing does drag a little bit at times, but it's still a really good film. I think it's very, very strong, and it stands the test of time, and it is very iconic. Richard Dreyfuss is great in it. But anyway, that's Close Encounters of the Third Kind at 28. 27, gone for another classic, which was really ahead of its time. That's Godzilla, or Godzilla, the original 1954 Japanese movie that started this mad, massive franchise in Japan, because some people might not know, but in Japan, the Godzilla movies are like what you think of big franchises in America, like slasher franchises or whatever, like sort of comic book franchises. So basically there's been about 20 different Godzilla movies alone coming out of Japan, maybe more, but around about 20. It's just crazy, really. And I've only seen this one out of the Japanese film, so I can't comment on any of the rest, but I know some of them are meant to be good and some not so, which isn't the norm. But it's just interesting how this is this big franchise in Japan, with all these different movies. And I saw the recent Godzilla, the I forget the title now, but the second one in like the American sort of reboot, and that was pretty decent for what it was. I had a pretty good time with that one. Not perfect, but it was solid enough, I thought. But yeah, this is the original Godzilla, and this really was groundbreaking. I was lucky enough to see this in the cinema actually a few years ago when I was like studying in Brighton. And it sort of has that, along with the original King Kong, it really defined the big monster movie and really set a new standard for it. For the time, the sets and just like whatever you want to call it, the animatronics, the robot, the design of Godzilla, really, really impressive. But it works as a spectacle. It works as a horror movie. There's intense moments in there, great visual moments, but also you've got the satire. You've got the satire on the politics and the whole missile crisis and stuff like that. And so it's this whole subtext of what was going on at the time, and it's just fascinating. And a monster movie like that could sort of touch on these things, and it plays into the anxiety. It's almost like a metaphor for that. The monster is like that sort of spiraling out of control. But yeah, really good film. Godzilla, the original Godzilla from 1954. My number 26 is a more recent film. It's Donnie Darko. So this came out almost 20 years ago, and I know it's an interesting film because it's one of those word of mouth sort of hits, and I think this is the thing some people forget about Donnie Darko. it's then when it originally came out, it wasn't actually a big hit. It was more of an indie type film, more of a cult type film that the critics were really talking about. I remember back in the day, Jonathan Ross really hyping it up, and Mark Kermode, various critics, but it actually got a small release. I mean, at the time I was living in Peterborough, my hometown, and I actually struggled to find it. I couldn't find it there. And it was when I went to London, I just, took the chance to see it there. And I'm so glad I did, because it really blew me away. But it just shows you now a lot of people talk about it, and I think the backlash is kind of the other way, with people saying, oh, it's overrated. People go on about it, and probably there's some truth to that, but I just think it's worth remembering it wasn't always the case. And it's sort of telling the fact that the next year, actually, this is during my Peterborough years where I was born, but they actually had like a Halloween screening of Donnie Darko at the local multiplex. So it's just funny how 1 year like previous, when it first came out, you couldn't find it anywhere in Peterborough, and then the next year they had like this Halloween screen. It just shows how it comes on. And I like when that happens with a film, when word of mouth spreads and they actually become hits. And in my opinion, Donnie Darko deserves it. I think it's a really good film. It's like an original take on the time travel type narrative, a very intriguing coming of age story, very good direction, a really great debut by Richard Kelly, who obviously has struggled to recapture this since. I've not seen the director's cut. I've seen a review of it, and it really doesn't appeal, because it goes further into the grandma death stuff, and you get like this whole narration from her book, and to me that just sounds like it's going to kill the flow of the film, because I like what they did with the grandma death stuff. It was an intriguing subplot in the original movie, but that was fine. That's as much of it as we needed. We don't need a whole narration to her book and stuff. That's just overkill. I mean, I probably will watch the director's cut one day, just out of like curiosity, but by the sounds of it, it's going to kill it. That's the way I would take it. Brilliant cast. Jake Gyllenhaal, who was an unknown at the time, this was his sort of breakout performance. This really put him to everyone's attention, and he's fantastic. He really juggles a lot as Donnie. He's very realistic as like this very downtrodden, very dry, very sarcastic, just awkward teen. You just believe in him. And some darker moments as well, like the scene in the mirror where Frank appears, and some really edgy scenes as well. So he handles it very well. The family are all really well cast. Mary McDonnell's a good actress. You really sympathise with her as the mother. Patrick Swayze, who's brilliant as the sleazy like motivational speaker, just like twisting around his like image, his sort of sex idol type image. And I think a lot of times Swayze is at his best when he's kind of playing the bad boy, when he's sort of twisting that around, a bit like he does in Point Break. He's like a great villain in that. So it's a great sort of performance from him. And the one that probably gets overlooked is probably Jenna Malone, who's really, she appears mostly in indie type movies, but she's very underrated as Donnie's girlfriend in this. Very likable, down to earth. And it's kind of, they do work the love story into this very well. It never really feels jarring, and of course it becomes important at the end. So they really work that stuff into it, and she's very natural and likable. And yeah, she is underrated, Jenna Malone. You do see her pop up in a lot, as I said, mostly indie movies, but she's never really gotten the credit she deserves. I mean, obviously she's still quite young, so there's still time for that more acclaim, but she does seem sadly underrated. I like her a lot. So it's really, really well cast. You've got Catherine Ross, who of course was in The Graduate years ago. And I have to talk about like just the dazzling, like the oddball black humour. I mean, there's so much in the mix, and I think they make it all work pretty well. The philosophy, the romance, but well, I was going to say the dazzling like style and the hip 80s soundtrack. The opening with Echo and the Bunnymen's Killing Moon, him coming in on the bike. I mean, that's just ingrained as like maybe one of my favourites, like openings of any film. Any film that opens with that, I'm sorry, I'm on board straight away. And yeah, I'm going to defend it. I think Donnie Darko is a wonderful film. Maybe one or two misjudged, moments. I think maybe with the Drew Barrymore character, but I really like it personally. That's Donnie Darko, my number 26. My number 22, back to the 80s now. Sorry, I said 22, duh. My number 25 is Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior from 1981. And Mad Max is one of these like rare franchises, if you want to call it a franchise, where I like all the movies basically. I like all four to a certain degree. Yes, I'm including Fury Road on this list. Well, I'll wait. You'll wait and see whether it's on the list. But I meant I'm including it as part of that franchise and as part of being really good. I really enjoyed Fury Road. But Mad Max 2 is really great. I think it improves on the first film. It sort of builds on that sort of simple revenge sort of premise. And it expands, I think, into darker, more daring sort of area, but still plenty of camp fun as well. Classic anti-hero story. I think Mel Gibson, by the time you get to the second film, has really slotted into the role and really made it his own at the time. So I think it is the shades of light and dark which really impress me. And yeah, really wacky characters, spot on observations. I think it is a very meaty sort of satire at times when it needs to be. But yeah, a rare sequel better than the original, and I like the original Mad Max, but I think this just takes the ideas a bit further, and it's a lot of fun to watch. It's really, really good stuff. Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. And actually, when I talk about Mad Max films, and I said I liked all four, and I stick by that. Now, the weakest is definitely the third part, Thunderdome, but hey, that's a guilty pleasure, and I enjoy it as a guilty pleasure. Tina Turner, all that, she rocks. So yeah, you can fight me on that. But yeah, Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior at 25. My number 24 is Ghost in the Shell, 1995. So I have to say that it is the original anime. Now, the recent remake with Scarlett Johansson, it's not on my list, but I do quite like that. I think it's solid. I think it's much better than anyone had the right to expect. It tends to get a lot of stick, and it was a bit of a flop, but I actually think it was solid compared to, considering how bad it could have been. I think there's some good performances. I think it has a style to it. It's not a patch on the original. I absolutely love this original, but yeah, I think it's okay. It's actually better than I was expecting. But the original, really tremendous anime, really intriguing ideas and characters, just a beautiful design, the colours and just the whole landscape of the city and the robots. It just looks absolutely gorgeous. You've got very distinct characters. It's very dreamlike, very surreal, has this really sort of cyberpunk sort of energy to it. And there's some wonderfully tense action scenes. I mean, really fast-paced, like action set pieces, but they're really impressive. And this is where the skill of the animation and the lightness of touch really comes in, because to make these action sequences seem so convincing, so realistic, and you still sort of keep track of it. I mean, that's the impressive thing. That really shows you the ability of the animation and just how good it is. And you have to remember it's the 90s, so it was before really we started getting all this great animation like we have now. It's kind of a film of its time, but it stands up really well as well. Great animation. Yeah, intriguing themes to do with technology and humanity, language. A really sort of great anti-hero at the heart of it. And I think the ending works all the better for leaving it open to the viewer's imagination. You are left to sort of judge it for yourself. But it's a really absorbing and original sci-fi premise and movie. If you've not seen it, track it down because it's really tremendous. The original Ghost in the Shell from 1995 is my 24. Number 23, again going to the more art house side of things, and this is Solaris from 1972. So the original Solaris. And again, I will mention the Hollywood remake. It was remade by Steven Soderbergh in 2002. You had George Clooney, Natasha Macaron. And it's worth checking out. I mean, as a different way to do the story, I think that's a pretty damn good film. A bit more of a, obviously, you know, stylish Hollywood character-driven type film, but enjoyable. It's actually, as a different kind of Solaris, it actually works pretty well. But yeah, going with the original here. I've only seen this once, which is probably why it's a bit lower. Again, that might be a surprise, but this is Andrei Tarkovsky's original space thriller. And the plot, in case you don't know of Solaris, is it's, you know, this space center and this scientific mission to the planet of the title Solaris. And it sort of stalls, when three scientists hit an emotional sort of crisis. And because it's a Tchaikovsky film, and because it's all very art house and slow burning and stuff, then it is more about the ideas. It is more about the human condition, and just a lot of slow moving character beats and plots, and more ambiguous, more about their emotions and the impact on the mission. Very little happens plot-wise, but it's all the better for that. Very dense, but it does have this beauty, this real, lightness of touch. Also, the atmosphere, it's really claustrophobic, really unsettling. You have this fascinating, central relationship, which, was made more of, I think, in the Hollywood version. They played up, the romance more. But even so, you do engage in their relationship here. Two very good performances. Fascinating ideas, and it's kind of doing that thing of, using space and the isolation of space and the loneliness as a metaphor for, human isolation, loneliness and various things. It's a very long movie. It's sort of around about 3 hours, maybe a bit more, but it justifies the length, partly because I think the length is part of the psychology of the film. I think it is this sense of this long sort of voyage, this kind of, it's hard to explain, but I think it's just one of those where it's part of the psychology, and your mind just races, and it's the endurance sort of thing. So really, the film being that long actually makes sense. Obviously, on the design level, it's amazing, and the direction, inventive little camera angle. It's very intimate at times, the way it really gets close in on the actors and their characters. A very moving and beautiful film. As I said, it justifies the 3 hours for me. So yeah, very good. That's Solaris, the original Solaris from 1972. So two more on this video. My number 22, it's E.T., the Extraterrestrial. So my second Spielberg movie on the list and on this video. So this is from the early 80s. It's obviously the heartwarming family classic, and it really defined the term Spielbergian when you think about that iconic shot of Elliot on the bike racing through the air, flying through the air, sorry, with E.T. in the basket, the shot of the moon in the background. It really stands out. It's really one of those iconic sort of images of 80s cinema, and it's so iconic they used it on the lunchbox and stuff like that. So this is kind of where all this stuff started with Spielberg, and it's undeniable, but it's a film that stands up. It's just so heartwarming and beautiful. You've got that classic spectacle. John Williams' main theme is again delightful. He's done so many good themes for Spielberg, but that just sort of gets your heart really racing every time you hear it. Many iconic images. I think it was the first film to really try and make like an alien invader sort of cute and family friendly, and that in itself is interesting. I mean, it's been overdone now, and there's a lot of bad imitations, but this was kind of the original, I think, in doing that. You've got Dee Wallace as the classic 1980s mum. She's great in the role. Nicely told 3-act story. It's all classic Spielberg. It is one of his best films, and it has stood the test of time. Another touch I like, which maybe doesn't get so talked about, is how smart Elliot is in the film. There's a scene near the end where they're in the lab. They've obviously captured E.T. and they've obviously they know that the government have sinister motives towards him, and it gets to this sort of point where they think E.T. is dead, and then he comes alive. Elliot's with him, but because Elliot doesn't want them to know it, he's telling E.T. to shush, and they do this whole thing where they trick the government. So that sort of thing. Elliot pretends he's crying basically to like fake that E.T. is actually dead. So I like that proactive, smart thinking, lead kid. But E.T.'s, glorious film. You can't go wrong. That's E.T. the extraterrestrial from 1982. My 22 and my 21, and the final part of this video, it's Aliens. And the S is crucial. Aliens from 1986. Boy, does James Cameron know how to do a sequel. I'll give him that. I'm not necessarily his biggest fan. Some of his films I like more than others. I'm dreading the Avatar sequels because it's ridiculous just doing 4 sequels on that. And I wasn't a big fan of the first film to begin with, so it has that working against it. But who knows? Generally speaking, he knows how to do a great sequel. He proved it with Terminator, and he proved it with Aliens. Obviously, Ridley Scott did the original, groundbreaking, considered by many to be a sci-fi classic. And this was Cameron's sequel, so he had a tough act to follow. And he does it pretty damn well. Now, obviously, I won't say, but by what I just said, there's a good chance the original might appear somewhere. But as a sequel, again, I think what you want from a sequel is a film which complements the first film but does its own thing. And that's what this does. It really builds on some of the themes and ideas. But with it being Cameron, it is more of a sort of nuts and bolts action type film. But that's no bad thing because he does action so well. Again, really good design. Like Scott, he's a fantastic visual director. And he does create a whole army of intriguing characters. I really like Paul Rising. How do you say his name? It's gone. The Mad About You guy. I think it's Rising or Riser. He was in like one of Stranger Things as well. But he's really, you think of him as being in lots of 80s films. He's really good as the sort of untrustworthy sort of like government type slime bag. But it's really well cast. You've got obviously Michael Biehn in there. You've got Bill Paxton, the late Bill Paxton. Really fantastic cast of characters as well. But also that the mother-daughter type relationship with Ridley and Newt adds something a little bit different again from the original, and that's really beautiful. That adds a whole different thing. Yeah, cast her on top form. Sigourney Weaver once again is great. Great dialogue, cool creature design, and plenty of tension too. So it does a good job of building on the original film. As I said, it complements it but does its own thing, and that's what any classic sequel should do. But there you have it, Aliens from James Cameron, my number 21, and I will just rerun the 10 movies I've done on this video before I close. So my number 30 was Brazil. My number 29 was Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the 78 version. 28, Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. 27, Godzilla, the original Japanese version from the 50s. 26, Donnie Darko, 2001. That's the year, not the film. 25, Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. 24, Ghost in the Shell, the animated version from 95. 23 was Solaris, the original 70s version. 22, E.T., and 21, I just did it, Aliens by James Cameron. So that's my latest 10 sci-fi movies on my top 50 countdown. If you have any thoughts on any of these films, then do let me know. Also, come up with your own lists in the comments below. Tell me some of your favourite sci-fi movies. But I'll be back very soon with the fourth part, which of course will be numbers 20 to number 11, and there should be some intriguing talking points on that video. But for now, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.